The sky above Valdaroon was dark purple, filled with slow-moving storm clouds and strange green lightning. Alien banners flapped in the dry wind. High above the royal court walls, inside the palace, the great hall was crowded with alien nobles. Each wearing sharp robes and hard eyes, they whispered in low voices. Watching the tall metal doors with suspicion, "He's here," someone muttered. "The human," another added, as if saying the word burned their tongue. Then the doors opened, and in stepped a man. He was not large, not glowing, not armored. He wore a simple dark jacket, dusty boots, and a calm face. His name was Evan Cross, and he had come alone. Every alien eye turned toward him. Some were curious, others angry. They had expected someone bigger, someone who looked like a warrior, not a traveler. The guards didn't move, but their hands rested near their weapons. Evan didn't blink. He walked slowly to the center of the hall and stopped. On the throne sat King Thalixar, ruler of the Western Crown. He was tall, covered in silver scales, with 4 golden horns and eyes like glowing amber. He looked down at Evan and gave a sharp, short laugh. "This ... is the one you sent me?" The king said loudly, his voice echoing, "A single human. One diplomat to stop a war." Evan's voice was calm. "One voice is sometimes louder than 10 armies." He replied. The court fell silent. Even the guards looked at each other, unsure what to think. Princess Celira, seated beside the throne, narrowed her eyes. She had seen many outsiders try to impress her father. Most failed, some died, but this human didn't shake, didn't bow too low, didn't try to please. He stood like he belonged there. The king leaned forward, his voice colder now. "You know nothing of our war, human. Our blood feud runs deeper than oceans, 2 houses ready to destroy each other, and you walk in with dusty boots and clever words. What do you think you can do?" Evan looked around the hall. "I didn't come with weapons," he said. "I came with truth. Maybe that's harder to face than a war blade." Gasps echoed across the chamber. One of the generals growled under his breath. Celira's gaze sharpened not in anger, but interest. The king sat back and studied Evan for a long moment. Then he motioned with one clawed hand. "Let him speak," he said. "I want to hear this human's truth." Evan nodded. He reached into his coat, slowly, carefully. A few guards stepped forward, but the king raised his hand weight from inside his coat. Evan pulled out a thin black disc. He placed it on the floor and tapped it twice. A hologram shimmered to life's an old map, glowing symbols, ancient words. Gasps filled the room again, louder this time. Some of the elders leaned forward in shock. It was a peace treaty, long lost, thought destroyed centuries ago, signed by both ruling houses, marked by a human crest. It had been made with the Old Earth Alliance during first contact. "This is not just paper," Evan said. "This is your history, your promise, your honor. You made peace before, and you can do it again." A heavy silence dropped over the hall. Celira stood, her eyes locked on the image. She had heard stories about such a treaty when she was a child, a dream, a myth, but here it was real, glowing, undeniable. King Thalixar stood slowly, his voice like thunder. "Where did you get this?" Evan looked up at him. "My ancestors kept it hidden. We believed it would be needed again one day. Looks like we were right." Some nobles began shouting. Others murmured in fear. The hall turned chaotic. Too much truth, too fast. One general pointed at Evan and yelled, "This is a trick, a trap. He's a spy." Swords were drawn, tension rising. But before anyone moved, the princess raised her hand. "Enough," she said sharply. "Let the human stay." Her father turned to her, surprised. "He carries something old, maybe something worth hearing," she added. The king stared at her, then looked back at Evan. "Very well," he said. You will stay in the palace under guard. Tomorrow, you speak to the High Council, and if you lie, you'll die." Evan gave a slow nod. "I won't waste your time," as the guards led him away. Salira watched him carefully, not with hate, but with curiosity. She didn't know it yet. But this quiet human was about to change everything Valdaroon knew about war, peace, and power, and maybe about love, too. Evan stood near the tall glass window in his royal chamber. Staring out at the strange sky of Valdaroon, green lightning flashed far in the distance, and the air had a soft hum, like the planet itself was alive. He could hear the whispers through the door guards talking about him, some with fear, others with doubt. He didn't blame them. He was just a human in the middle of something ancient and broken, a civil war with roots deeper than most trees on Earth. Suddenly, the door opened, and a warrior stepped in, tall and armored, his helmet under his arm. He had dark red skin with 2 short tusks and golden markings across his jaw. "You're lucky the princess spoke for you," the warrior said without greeting. "Others wanted your head." Evan nodded slowly. "And you?" "I want to see what's so special about you," the alien said. "Come with me. The king waits." They walked through the long, glowing halls of the palace, past statues of heroes, past paintings of war. The people stopped and stared as the human passed by. Some bowed slightly, unsure of how to act. Others turned their backs. In the throne room, King Thalaxor sat alone on his high seat, his expression unreadable. He watched Evan closely as the human approached and stood before him again. "I should not be meeting you in private," the king said slowly. "But I am tired of lies, and I want to see if yours are different." "I'm not here to lie," Evan replied. "I'm here to remind you of something you once believed in." The king laughed bitterly. "Belief, human, is for the young and the weak. I have lived long enough to see peace break and blood spill. That treaty you brought, it means nothing. Now it means something to your people," Evan answered. They stared at it like it was a light in the dark. "The people don't matter," the king growled. "It is the council, the warlords, the clans, and they want war." Evan took a breath and stepped forward. "Then bring them to me, all of them, not one by one, but together. Let them look at me and tell me to my face that they would rather fight than talk." The king raised an eyebrow. "Impossible? The clans won't sit in the same room. They would kill each other before the meeting even starts." "Then lock the doors," Evan said, "and don't open them until someone agrees to peace." A silence filled the room. Even the guards at the door didn't move. "You are either very stupid," the king said at last, "or very dangerous, maybe." "Both," Evan replied with a small smile. A low chuckle escaped the king's throat. He leaned back and waved one clawed hand. "Fine, human, you'll have your meeting. But if a single blade is drawn, you die first." "Fair," Evan said simply. The king's eyes narrowed. "Your confidence is strange. Are you truly here just for peace? Or is there something else?" Evan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked up at the ceiling, where ancient words were carved in glowing runes. "Do you know what those say?" he asked. The king glanced upward, then back at him. "Old words, from the First Empire. They say honor is greater than power." Evan said softly. "My people remember that. Even when we forget it, it finds its way back to us." The king stared at him, something cold and sharp behind his eyes. "You are not like the others we have met from Earth," he said. "You speak like a warrior, but carry no sword. Words are sharper than swords." "Sometimes," Evan replied. Before the king could answer, the door opened again. Princess Salira stepped in, her expression unreadable. She walked past the guards and stood beside her father. But her eyes never left Evan. "I've summoned the High Council," she said quietly. "They will arrive by sunrise." The king looked at his daughter in surprise. "You did this without my order." "I thought the human should have his chance. She said calmly, and I thought it would be. Interesting to see what happens. Evan met her eyes. There was no smile between them, but something past a small. Silent understanding. The king let out a sigh and rubbed his temple. Fine, let the fire burn, but if it consumes us all, it will be your name they curse. Human, I'll take that risk, Evan said. That night, as the alien moons moved across the sky, the palace guards doubled in number, every noble sharpened their tongues and their blades, and somewhere deep in the city, a secret voice whispered, "The human will not leave this planet alive." The High Council chamber was shaped like a circle, carved from dark stone and lit by floating crystals that pulsed with pale light. There were no windows, no exits. Once the doors closed, it was made to keep secrets inside, and people, to Evan, stood in the center, surrounded by 24 alien leaders. Every one of them represented a house, a fleet, or a deadly faction. Some were tall and covered in scales, others short with glowing skin. All of them looked ready to kill, not listen, no. Guards stood between them. That was the king's command. They wanted peace. They would need to choose it themselves. Evan held nothing in his hands. No weapon, no translator. He spoke in their language clearly, one word at a time. I stand here. Not as a threat, but as a reminder, he said. You all made a promise before, sealed in blood and honor. I am here to awaken it. Some council members hissed, others folded their arms, unimpressed. Then Evan pulled a small black cube from his jacket. He placed it on the floor and stepped back. The cube clicked once, and a glowing figure rose from it. It was an old alien, tall, regal, with deep blue eyes, the first king of Valdaroon, long dead, but recorded in hologram. His voice echoed in the chamber. You who carry my blood, my name, my duty, hear the words once spoken in unity. War will break us, peace will raise us. A hush fell over the room, even the angriest warlords froze. The hologram shifted, showing the original treaty again. 2 handprints, one alien, one human, bound by oath, centuries old. Evan spoke again. This is not a trick, not a weapon. It's a memory yours, buried in history, waiting to be remembered. One of the generals stepped forward. His voice sharp. You bring us ghosts and expect surrender. No. Evan said softly, I expect you to look at yourselves. Look at what this war has made you: paranoid, hateful, divided. He walked slowly in a circle, meeting their eyes one by one. My kind has fought wars too. We've made mistakes, spilled blood over pride. But when we remembered who we were, we found a way back. Another noble sneered. And what makes you think we want to go back? Evan didn't blink, because if you didn't, you wouldn't have come here. You wouldn't be standing in silence, afraid of what this means. A heavy silence followed. No one moved, no one spoke. Then the door slammed open. Everyone turned. A figure in dark armor stormed in. General Tharnox, the king's most feared warlord, leader of the Southern Blades. He wasn't invited. He walked straight to Evan, towering over him. His voice was low and dangerous. This ends now. You don't belong here, human. Your lies have poisoned the air long enough. Evan looked up at him. I didn't lie, he said calmly. I brought proof. Tharnox snarled and drew his blade. It crackled with blue energy. The room tensed. No one stopped him. But before he could strike, someone shouted, Enough! The voice came from the upper ring of the chamber. Princess Celira stepped forward. Cloak trailing behind her, she looked at the warlord, then at the others. You draw a weapon here. Now, in front of the treaty that made us royal. Are you so afraid of one human? Tharnox lowered the blade slightly, but his eyes burned. He is a trick, a shadow from the past. Maybe, she said. Walking down the steps, but he came here alone, with no army, and we strong, proud. United cannot even speak without blood. Evan remained silent. He knew this wasn't his moment, it was hers. Celira reached the center and stood beside him. "Let him finish," she said firmly. "If we kill the voice of peace today, what does that say about us?" No one answered. The blade lowered completely. Tharnox gave Evan one last glare and turned away, but his words hung heavy in the air. Evan turned to the council once more. He placed his hand over the treaty projection. "I don't ask you to like me. I ask you to think about what you lose if you ignore this." The treaty glowed brighter under his touch. The human signature reacted alive somehow. A soft hum filled the air, like old magic waking up. Princess Celira's eyes widened. "It's responding to him," she whispered. "No outsider has ever done that." The council stared in stunned silence. Something ancient had stirred, and not even the warlords could ignore it anymore. Outside, the storm clouds began to break. Just slightly, but enough to let in a ray of soft golden light. The palace was quiet that night, too quiet. Even the wind outside had stilled. Like the planet itself was holding its breath. Evan couldn't sleep. He sat at the edge of his bed, fully dressed, staring at the small hologram cube on the table. The treaty still glowed faintly inside it, reacting to his presence like it was. Alive, he had faced diplomats before, soldiers, even angry mobs back on Earth. But this was different. He was in the heart of an alien kingdom. Surrounded by people who thought he was either a miracle or a mistake, there was a knock at the door. 3 slow taps, soft but firm. Evan stood, cautious. The guards weren't supposed to knock, they just entered. He opened the door carefully, and there stood Princess Celira, alone, her cloak draped over her shoulder, eyes sharp in the dim light. "May I come in?" she asked. Evan stepped aside. "You shouldn't be here, not without guards," he said. "I brought something more useful than guards," she whispered, pulling a small device from her belt and activating a silence field. "No one can hear us now." He nodded slowly. "You don't trust your own court." "I don't trust anyone who fears peace," she replied. Walking into the room and sitting across from him, "You stirred something today, Evan, something dangerous." He sighed. "I thought I was prepared for that." "You weren't," she said simply. "No one ever is." There was a long pause. Then she leaned forward and looked him in the eyes. "They won't wait for the next meeting," she said softly. "They will try to silence you before dawn." Evan didn't look. Surprised, "I guessed as much," he said. "They already tried once, didn't they?" Celira stiffened. "You knew?" "I saw the shadow on my wall the first night I arrived," he said. "Someone stood there for 5 minutes, then left." Celira looked shaken. "That wasn't me." "I know," Evan said. "But you came later that same night. You knocked." Differently, she was silent for a moment, then said, "You need to move. There's a place inside the palace, hidden chambers near the old vaults. They were built for times of betrayal." Evan stood and grabbed the treaty cube. "You're risking a lot by helping me," he said. She met his gaze firmly. "I'm not helping you. I'm helping peace, and I'm tired of watching my people die for pride." As they stepped out into the hallway, a soft clicking sound echoed. From around the corner, 2 fast 4-foot steps, too slow for machines. Evan stopped, eyes narrowing. Celira grabbed his arm and pulled him down a side passage. "Assassins," she whispered. Silent blades sent by Tharnox. The corridor turned dark, only lit by small flickering wall lamps. Shadows danced around them, and then a sudden blur movement. Fast and deadly, a blade swung from the shadows, slicing the air where Evan's neck had been seconds earlier. He ducked, rolled, grabbed a broken staff from the floor and swung. It connected with something solid, and a growl rang out. Celira raised her arm and fired a stun pulse. A figure collapsed, one assassin down, but two more dropped from the ceiling. Silent and cold, they moved like liquid death, blades flashing in the low light. Evan kicked one away and blocked the other with the staff. He wasn't a soldier, but he fought with desperation and focus. Celira used her training, striking pressure points, dodging with perfect control together. They moved like they had done this before, like they were more than just strangers. When the last assassin fell unconscious, Celira looked at Evan, her chest rising and falling quickly. "You fight better than most warriors," she said. Surprised, "I was raised in a war zone," he answered, wiping blood from his lip. "Didn't have a choice." She stared at him, eyes softer now. "Maybe you're the only one who does." Evan looked at her. "We need to get to that vault." They moved fast through the lower halls, using hidden routes and locked passages. Behind an old council chamber, Celira pressed her palm to a wall scanner. The stones slid open with a low hiss, revealing a hidden stairway as they entered. The walls closed behind them, and for the first time since arriving, Evan felt truly out of reach. They were safe for now. But above them, in the main palace, Tharnak stood in front of the king. "The human is missing," he said darkly, "and someone helped him escape." The king's eyes flicked to the empty seat where his daughter should have been. He said nothing, but his silence said everything. Deep beneath the palace, the hidden vault was cold and silent. The walls were thick with metal veins, pulsing softly like the heartbeat of the ancient palace. Evan walked beside Celira, his steps echoing in the narrow stone corridor. She held a dim torch in one hand and a pulse blaster in the other. Neither of them spoke. Words had become dangerous, even between allies. Every sound, every breath, felt like it might trigger something waiting in the dark. They passed faded murals showing the early days of Valdaroon peace, trade unity with distant stars. And then the murals shifted, showing fire, war, betrayal. Evan paused in front of one image that caught his eye. It showed a humanoid painted clearly, but the shape was unmistakable. The figure stood with open arms between two alien armies, just like he had hours ago. Celira noticed his gaze. "We had legends," she said, her voice low, "about humans who came during the First War. Not warriors, peacemakers, but no one believed they were real. Sometimes stories are the only truth left," Evan whispered, then turned and continued forward. At the end of the corridor stood a thick metal door, sealed with old tech. Celira pressed her hand to the scanner, then looked at Evan. "Now you," she said. He hesitated. "I'm not from here." "You carry the treaty," she replied. "That means you carry something deeper." He placed his palm on the second panel. It flashed red, then green, then pulsed gold with a soft groan. The door slid open. Inside was a round chamber, full of relics from before the Civil War, ancient weapons, scrolls, memory stones, and in the center a large orb resting on a pedestal. The orb glowed gently when Evan stepped close. Celira stood behind him, silent, watching. He placed the treaty cube beside the orb, and they both lit up at once. A pulse of energy surged through the room, activating long-dead systems. Light flowed across the ceiling, forming patterns and words that neither of them had ever seen before. A hologram rose again, but this time it was different. It showed both houses of Valdaroon kneeling side by side. The last recorded moment of unity ever shown to the public, never taught. Evan turned to Celira. "This is what they feared. The truth doesn't divide them. It embarrasses them." She nodded slowly. "Peace takes more courage than war." A sudden alarm blared above them low, muffled but clear. They were discovered. Celira turned sharply. "They've tracked us," she said. "We don't have much time." Evan picked up the treaty cube and looked around the chamber. "Then let's not waste it." He activated a memory stone, and placed the treaty data inside. Then he took a backup copy and slid it into the lining of his jacket. If I don't make it out, this has to, he said. Celera opened a side tunnel built for emergency escapes. Follow me. There's a route that leads to the old assembly halls. If we can get there before sunrise, we might still reach the king. But as they stepped out of the vault, shadows were already waiting. 6 armored soldiers stood in the tunnel, weapons raised, their eyes cold and silent. They didn't speak, they just aimed. Evan stepped in front of Celera, holding out the treaty cube. "You'll have to shoot through this first," he said calmly. One of the soldiers hesitated, another lowered his weapon slightly. But a third moved forward, raising a blade to strike before he could swing. Celera moved, faster than lightning. She dropped 2 soldiers with stun blasts, then kicked the blade from the attacker's hand. Evan fought beside her, dodging energy bolts and striking with brutal precision. He wasn't trained like she was, but he had the instincts of someone who had survived worse. In the chaos, the cube was knocked from his hands and skidded across the floor. One of the soldiers reached for it, but before he could grab it, Evan tackled him to the ground, slamming his elbow into the alien's helmet. Blood ran down Evan's forehead. He didn't care. He grabbed the cube, turned, and shouted, "Go." Now, Celera pulled a hidden lever, opening a wall panel behind her. She fired a smoke round to blind the soldiers and dragged Evan through the escape passage. They ran without stopping, hearts pounding, breaths sharp. At last, they reached the old assembly halls. They were dusty and forgotten, filled with broken statues and echoes of old speeches. Evan fell to his knees, panting. He looked at Celera with tired eyes. "They won't stop," he said. "No, they won't," she replied. "Which is why tomorrow we make sure the entire court sees the truth with their own eyes." Morning light spilled across the palace, but the halls were not warm. There was a strange tension in the air, as if everyone could feel something coming but didn't know what it was. Whispers ran through the stone corridors. The human had survived, and the princess was with him. In the royal court, nobles gathered once again. Wearing sharp armor and sharper smiles, the king sat high on his throne, unmoving, his fingers tapping slowly against the stone armrest. Tharnex stood beside him, cloaked in silence, his eyes scanning the crowd for signs of weakness or betrayal. Then the doors opened and Evan walked in. His jacket was torn, blood-crusted. On his brow, he held the treaty cube high in one hand, his back straight, his steps slow but sure. Beside him, Princess Celera walked in royal silence. Her armor cleaned, her face unreadable. She walked like a daughter of kings, but stood like a soldier ready for war. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Some nobles leaned forward, others clenched their fists. "I asked for this moment," the king said, his voice deep and cold. "I ordered no interference, yet my own halls reek of treachery." No one spoke, no one admitted anything, but eyes shifted. Evan stepped into the center, placed the cube down, and activated it. But this time, he didn't speak. He simply turned and walked to the side, allowing the image to speak for itself. From the cube rose, not just the treaty, but the full holographic memory. It showed the 2 royal houses kneeling together. It showed the original unity ceremony, and then something new. A voice spoke, not Evan's, not the king's. It was the voice of the first king, a lost recording buried inside the cube. "If peace is ever lost, let the truth awaken. Let no pride stand above unity. And let the one who carries this light remind you who you once were." The entire court was silent. Even Tharnex couldn't speak. The image faded. Evan looked at them all, his voice quiet but strong. "You don't have to like me," he said. "You don't even have to trust me, but that voice, your own blood, just told you what to do. The choice is now yours." A murmur grew across the chamber. Some nobles stood, Others looked at the king. Then one voice broke the silence. A war elder, old and scarred, stepped forward and bowed his head slightly. I remember that voice. He said, "I was a child when the temple still played the old oaths. We were not meant to live in war forever." Another noble joined him, and then another. They placed their hands over their hearts, a gesture from ancient peace rituals. Tharnix stepped forward, rage burning in his eyes. "This is weakness," he hissed. "You would all bend to a human trick." He drew his blade and pointed it at Evan. "If he truly stands for peace, let him choose who rules us now." The king raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. All eyes turned to Evan. He looked at the king, then at Celira, and then at the roomful of leaders. He took a breath, slow and deep. "I won't choose a king," he said. "I will name a guardian, someone who held back the war when everyone else fed it." He stepped forward and placed his hand gently on Celira's shoulder. She didn't draw her blade first. She stood beside truth when it cost her safety, and she fought not to win, but to protect. The chamber erupted in shock. Even the king blinked in surprise. "She is royal," Evan said. "But more than that, she is ready." Celira looked at him, eyes wide, then turned to her father. The king stared at them both for a long moment. Then, slowly, he stood. The hall fell silent. He walked down the steps, his boots echoing against the stone. He stopped in front of his daughter, and then he did something no one expected. He placed his crown heavy, jagged, and ancient in her hands. "You have my blessing," he said softly, "and my place." Gasps rang out across the court. But before anyone could speak, he turned to Evan, and, "You human have something far rarer." He reached into his chest plate and pulled out a gold emblem shaped like a flame held in a hand. A symbol never given to an outsider. He pinned it on Evan's jacket, just above his heart. "You are now protector of Valdaroon," the king said, "not a ruler. Not a warrior, but a shield between us and our worst selves." Evan stood still, stunned. The room bowed as one, except for Tharnix, who turned and walked away, defeated. But not gone. And in that moment, a human who came to stop a war became part of an alien legend. The great hall was full again, but this time it felt different. No tension in the air, no hidden blades, only breathless silence. Outside, the storm had passed. Sunlight spilled through the high crystal windows for the first time in weeks, and the people of Valdaroon gathered below the palace walls, waiting, watching. Evan stood at the side of the throne. Still wearing his torn jacket, the golden flame emblem shone brightly over his heart. He had not changed into fine robes, had not worn any crown, but no one missed who he was now. Princess Celira sat on the throne not above the people, but among them. Her first act as ruler had been to lower the seat and open the court to every voice. She held no sword, only the treaty cube in her lap, glowing softly like a living thing. Nobles and citizens alike knelt in silence. Even the old warlords had bowed not because they were forced, but because they knew. Then the king, now retired, but still respected, stepped forward once more. His steps were slower now, but his voice still carried weight. He raised one hand and spoke to the entire hall. "A human came to us. Not as a conqueror, not as a servant. He carried no armor, no army, only truth." He turned to Evan, his eyes firm but full of something rare respect. "You stopped a war that our blood could not. You reminded us of what we once were, and for that, Valdaroon owes you a debt no title can repay." Evan shifted uncomfortably. He had never done any of this for reward. He had come to try nothing more, but the king was not finished. "I offer one more gift," he said, "not from a throne, but from my family." The hall murmured with curiosity. The king turned to Celira, then back to Evan. "She has chosen to rule, but she also has the right to choose her own path. And so I ask this question not as a father, but as one soul recognizing another. He looked Evan in the eyes. Will you stand beside her? Not as protector, not as hero, but as a partner in peace, in rebuilding, in life. The hall froze. Even Celera blinked, startled. This had not been planned. This was not political. This was personal. Evan stepped forward slowly. He looked at the princess, no longer the cold strategist he first met, but the woman who had risked everything for hope. She looked at him not with command, but with calm, steady warmth. I didn't come here for this, Evan said softly, but maybe. This is why I was meant to come. He took her hand. And the hall erupted not in chaos, but in cheers, a sound not heard in generations. Outside the palace, the people raised their banners, not of war, but of unity. Human and alien symbols side by side. In the days that followed, Evan worked beside Celera not as king, but as bridge. He walked among the people, helped restore ancient temples, taught Earth history in alien schools, and learned Valdaroon traditions. With the children, trade began again. Soldiers laid down their arms to build, not fight, and across the stars other worlds watched in awe. How did the humans do it? They whispered. How did one voice calm a world? But the people of Valdaroon knew he had not done it alone. He had simply reminded them of what they had forgotten and stood still when others ran at night. In the quiet palace garden, Evan sometimes looked up at the twin moons. Celera would sit beside him, her hand resting lightly on his. And when she asked him what he saw up there, he never answered with stars. He answered with one word: home. And the galaxy would never forget the human who came without a sword and left behind a world changed forever.